Hannah. Hannah had the children. She was able to bear children for him. And back in biblical times, women achieved self-worth by bearing sons, if you remember that. And that's not too untrue for today in some societies, like China, the Middle East, and even in today's United States, some cultures here also put a lot of importance. And women ourselves, we identify our womanhood with bearing children. And sometimes society can put a big weight on us when they see we cannot conceive. So it makes it even harder for us. So Hannah had to deal with that in those days, unable to bear a son for her husband. Her affliction and frustration was even worsened by her rival, the other wife, poking at her, jeering her, making her feel less than a woman. And we know all of us as women probably have come across other women and sisters that has done us that way. So we can relate to Hannah in some form or fashion. So Hannah had to deal with that daily ridicule for years and years. Elkanah, her husband, loved Hannah dearly. She was the love of his eye. He was sympathetic to her, tender, caring, and kind, and tried to support her and try to understand and be empathetic to what she was dealing with. But unless you're a woman and dealing in that, it still did not work. He even gave her double portions of peace offering and did everything he could to encourage Anna and to lift her spirit up, to get over this feeling of non-self-worth. All this attention was in vain, though. Nothing he could do could fill the void of not having a child, especially a boy child. She lacked the most precious gift her marriage life could offer, because in marriage, that's one of the meaning of the union between a man and wife, right? To be fruitful, multiply. So she was not able to fulfill that obligation she felt as a woman she should be able to, and more specifically, give him a male child. God had closed her womb, as we read in the Bible, okay? So at this time, I'd like to, before I go further, I'll have you with Bible in hand. I like reading from the Word. I'm glad I didn't have to use the screen. We've gotten away from doing that a lot. I was brought up by a Pentecostal grandmother, and we read lots of Bible. Lots of hours on the knees. So if you can turn to 1 Samuel 1, 10 through 18 and read with me. I'll give you a chance to get there, and then we'll continue. 1 Samuel 1, 10 through 18. Okay, I still hear some pages. That's great. I love the sound of that. Isn't that wonderful? Amen. Okay, we there? All right, together. In bitterness of soul, Hannah wept much and prayed to the Lord together. And she made a vow, saying, O Lord Almighty, if you will only look upon your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, How long will you keep on getting drunk? Get rid of your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him. she said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. So, if you see what I just read, as I go along, I'll pull out what I learned from this lesson. Okay? So when Eli consoled her by asking if he wasn't enough, he wasn't better than 10 sons, she controlled her emotion and partook of food with the family. Then she went to the temple of the Lord. There she wept in anguish, still crying, still in anguish. She poured out bitterly her heart and soul. You could, as I was reading this, I could just imagine the pain she was going through. You know, just from a personal note, my husband and I had our first child and was trying to have a second child. And years went on, and 2 years, 3 years, and I could relate to Hannah. You praying and praying and praying, but I was not as strong as Anna, I will have to admit. Finally, I just said, I guess if it's going to happen, it will. If it doesn't, well, that's just the way it's going to be. But Hannah kept on praying. Hannah prayed and prayed year after year. She wept in anguish and poured out her heart, like I said, but she believed that God of heaven alone could lift the burden of her shoulders. And she cast it upon the Lord in prayer, for God had promised to meet his children at the tabernacle. So she did not give up. She had faith, and that's what I want to bring out in this. She had faith in the fact that the Lord was going to take care of her, okay? And she prayed ceasingly. She did not quit praying. Hannah prayed prayer in 1 Samuel 1:11 says, what we just read. Her prayer was a vow. She prayed, "O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, you will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life." At that point, she was willing to give up this gift she's been praying for years. You know what that takes as women in the audience? A mother, you bear a child, and you're promising to give it away? I sat there as I read that, and I said, whew, that's tough. That is a tough vow. I don't know if I would be that strong to be able to give my child away. That took a lot, something in her to be able to go to that extreme, to be willing to give up something she carried for 9 months, felt the heartbeat, the kick. You know, for those that have children, you develop this bond with that baby, then to give it up, you know, it's a tough one. So I just praise Anna to be able to even go to that extent, okay? Her attitude in prayer was one thing I pulled out in this, was important. Even though she was greatly troubled, she praised God through her troubles. How tough is that? When things are not going your way, to continue praising him. That's tough. That is really tough. That's when you have to dig deep inside and pull out all the strength and the faith, and your spiritual life is tested when things are not going our way. And she declared her beliefs and faith in him. Some other things I saw in this. Even though she was crying, she didn't stop praying. When the storms is there, we can't stop praying. The power of prayer conquers all of that, all the challenges in life. You know, as humans, we go, and women especially, I know this is Women's Day, but I'm going to tie in how the men played a part in Hannah's life too. Men were there, okay? So as we go through things like trouble at work, divorces, you know, children, you raise them up in the church, they decide to go their way. I have a child that's first year in college that's testing me right now. So away from home, So I stay on my knees, and said, I've raised them right in the Lord. I pray that his holy angel will surround him to make the right decisions. As when we have our teenagers go off to college, it is tough as a mother because you worry about them. You worry what they're doing, what if they're going to follow the teachings that you've taught them. So for Hannah to think, I'll give him away, that's hard. I went through a tough time letting go of my 18-year-old when it was graduation. And all along, I kept on saying, I'm fine. I can handle this. I'm tough. I can do this. And my mom said, just wait. Just wait. So I escorted him to school. We packed the dorm up. And he said, okay, Mom, go. Go forth and do your Air Force thing. It's my time to shine. And I went, I can't do this. And embarrassed him because I was going to hold it together. I totally broke down amongst all his future peers. And he just looked at me and go, oh.